Hi, I'm James Minick of Minick Law. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Asheville's Nuisance Court, which is a particular program in Asheville where certain misdemeanor charges can go through and be dismissed upon completion of typically just community service. Sometimes other requirements need to be satisfied, but typically it's just community service. Asheville's Nuisance Court is held generally on the last Thursday of any given month. Sometimes that is changed for holiday reasons or other reasons, but certainly in November and December with Thanksgiving, Christmas, sometimes that switched around a little bit, but it's typically held on the fourth Thursday of the month. In order to get into the nuisance court program, it is typically a good idea to have an attorney because it can be a little bit confusing on who to talk to. There are only certain district attorneys that have authority to put cases in Buncombe County into the nuisance court. So it's important to make sure that your case is presented to the right person that has the authority to get the case into nuisance court. No case is just set into nuisance court. It has to be moved there after a request to an appropriate district attorney. So there's just no case that the original date on the citation would be in a nuisance court. Typically, misdemeanor charges in North Carolina, or in Buncombe County in particular, are set to the first full week of the month into what is called administrative court or admin court, and then could be set to an officer's court date. But in order to get the case into nuisance court, it has to be specifically moved to a nuisance court date. The type of charges that are generally allowed into nuisance court are misdemeanor charges. They're typically larceny-related offenses. A lot of underage drinking tickets are allowed to go through nuisance court. Misdemeanor possession of marijuana, paraphernalia, potentially other misdemeanor possession of controlled substance charges, trespassing. These are the most common types of cases allowed through the nuisance court. And there can be other charges as well. Those are the most common. What happens in nuisance court is that a person goes in front of the presiding judge with an attorney, basically signs an agreement that is entered with the state that person will perform a certain amount of community service in order to have the charge dismissed. And so basically, once the charge is brought in front of nuisance court, the person originally enters a guilty plea, is generally placed onto unsupervised probation for a period of 6 months, and then is given a nuisance court review date in 2 months. If they've completed the required community service before that review date, then at that review date, 2 months down the road from the first nuisance court date, the charge will be dismissed. The guilty plea will be allowed to be withdrawn. The charge will be dismissed. And at that point, the person potentially could apply for an expungement or petition the court for an expungement, which would permanently remove the charge from that person's criminal record. Again, so you've got 2 nuisance court dates. The first where basically there's a guilty plea to the charge entered and an agreement entered with the state to have the charges dismissed, and a second date when basically the case is dismissed upon completion of the community service and upon payment of the court costs, which are currently in 2013 $180. Please feel free to contact our firm about your case, whether you'd be eligible to get into nuisance court. Eligibility is going to depend on the charge as well as on a person's criminal history. So contact us to determine your eligibility for nuisance court as well as to discuss the particulars of your case.